Seven on Sundays podcast is intended for mature audiences. Episodes discuss sensitive and fraught topics that many teens and 20-somethings face, but may be triggering. The content may not be suitable for all audience members. Please take caution when listening.
Anytime I would tell him no for anything, he'd throw a fit like a toddler. Like silent treatment, he would just ignore me, threaten to break up with me type of things, and like just all of this like weird, chaotic stuff. I tried to break up with him at one point and he wouldn't let me. He wouldn't let me leave. I was like, great, I'm now stuck in your house. What am I going to do?
Hello and welcome to Seven on Sundays, the podcast about how young adults are navigating sex, relationships, and life today.
We are your hosts, Dr. Shez Leby and Stephanie Boy, and each week we will share our candid conversations with young adults and experts about today's tough topics.
Today we have a really powerful episode. You'll hear the story about Lilith, who grew up with a mom who was in and out of mostly unhealthy relationships. Most of her childhood was fearful of what her mother's boyfriends might do to hurt them. And as a child, she also realized that she was helpless to protect her and her mother. So some of the stories that Lilith shares, we did not explore fully on the podcast. We discussed some of those with her post-interview call to make sure that she was working through that trauma with her therapist. But you will hear a lot of her stories. Today, Lilith is a mother herself. She's been in and out of abusive relationships, but she wants a different life for her son. And she understands her situation is repeating the patterns that she went through with her mother in her childhood. She is learning to advocate for herself. There's stuff she is still working through. This podcast is really important for people with deeply embedded trauma. Dr. Shez gives Lilith amazing tools to reframe her memories and to empower herself to begin to make the changes that she needs.
She was one of our podcast guests to date that has been kind of still actively in the mix of a really difficult and I would say traumatic situation. So we're keeping close tabs on her and, really want to stay connected to help in any way, but also make sure that she has her support systems in place. I think this interview kind of shows a little bit of what trauma therapy can do and how you can kind of work beyond that. She definitely has chronic and complex PTSD, in my outsider opinion. I would also say that her traumas from her childhood are so intense that you can see how it's affected her memory, her ability to process emotion, probably her judgment, impulsivity, all those kinds of things, and her relationships for sure. There is a checklist kind of test. It's called the ACEs test, and it's adverse childhood experiences. And my guess is that Lilith has a lot of those adverse childhood experiences and has a really high score. When people have a high score for that, it does kind of arrest some brain development of the prefrontal cortex and also the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is what is affecting her ability for memory and to process emotion. And as I said, her judgment and impulsivity. So it makes sense, her kind of struggle with addiction, her struggle with these relationships, all those things. As you said, Steph, the transgenerational patterns that probably were in play are stopping now. Like we are drawing a line in the sand to help her, and we'll continue to help her. Like you said, we have talked to her after this interview just to make sure we're following up. But her transgenerational trauma, she's the one that it's stopping because she's reaching out and wants to do differently with her son.
You talked about the ACEs test, and I've seen this on Oprah like years ago. I just remember that the more adverse childhood events that you have, you score higher, but that higher score also means that you have negative long-term health impacts. And hearing you say that it also impacts the impulsivity, I know that as the prefrontal cortex shrinks, that's really the brake system of your brain. So if you have an impulse to do something and that prefrontal cortex has been shrunk, it's giving you less ability to hit the brakes and not do something that your impulse says to do. So in her particular case, where she does struggle with drugs and alcohol, her history is impacting her present day ability to fight against the addictions or the things that she has an impulse to do. So I think they're important to keep in mind.
100%. And it may not have shrunk, but the gray matter is less on MRI imaging. So the gray matter is less. So it could be because this started at age 5, and for other people that are part of research in that it just never developed fully. The beauty of our brains is they are neuroplastic, and people can help her bring herself back up to the right developmental space. It's not a this is done and your brain will never develop gray matter. For her, this can be helped. So that's beautiful. And she's making, some conscious changes as a parent. It's so hard because of her maybe financial situation or where she is, having to live with her mother, which you'll see in the interview. Whenever trauma is happening, safety is first. Like, you have to find yourself a safe environment and give that to your body and your nervous system and everything first. So that's a first order of business for her. The other thing that's really important for her that we are excited to talk about is she was able to identify a grandmother that was a support system, but also find a new mantra for herself. She had always thought that I get the short end of the stick. Like, I've been, really hurt and I've had these bad things happen. And her new mantra is never give up. So that just gives me chills. I feel like I want to cheer her on, and I'm so excited for her and others to have that mantra of don't give up, because your brain is constantly changing, your life is constantly changing, your parenting can change, your situation can change. And we gave her kind of the tools of using her choice and her voice. And that's what we want her to do.
Yes, Lilith. Dr. Shez and I were both really impressed with your warrior mama spirit. So you've got this. Don't give up. Now let's jump into Lilith's story. Lilith, I know from talking to you before that your family of origin seems to be the place where you carry that, I don't know whether you want to call it dysfunctionality or toxicity from. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the way that you grew up to give us some insight to what brings you to present day and the situations maybe that you found yourself in.
I have blacked out a lot of my childhood, but my family likes to sometimes like talk about memories and like it jogs them. And I'm like, oh, great, there's that. But growing up a lot, there was a lot of like moving around. I remember a few of my mom's boyfriends, not so much as I was super little before my sister's dad, but like thereafter I do. They weren't always the best. There were like a handful of good ones here and there, but they really weren't always the best. My sister's dad, he'd have like outbursts. He's chased me and my mom out of the house before, like chased us out of the house. Like we're still running from him outside of the house. And like then he caught up to us because my mom had me so young. I witnessed a lot more than my siblings have. So they don't have a lot of the same experiences that I do. And also the fact they're after me. So my mom's kind of picked up new things and figured out like, oh, let's not do this or let's not do that. And I'm just like, well, I got the short end of the stick. I will say my mom, when she handles things, sometimes she makes a good point in what she's saying, but she does it in the worst way possible. Like lashes out really bad over small, minor things, like 4 hours of screaming and yelling early in the morning over a TV remote being missing. And I wasn't even the one who lost it, type of thing. With that and just constant moving and chaos and always like loud houses, not really having a structure and things like that is just, it kind of sets you up for like not knowing what's like peaceful or what's calm and what's normal, rather than just going around everything that was going on.
So you're the oldest. How old was your mom when she had you?
17.
And how old are you?
23.
Like it sounds like a childhood of a lot of anxiety and a lot of chaos and a lot of stress and a lot of moving and a lot of instability. And then coupled with this kind of explosiveness that could happen with the boyfriend and with your mom. And so that becomes your normal. Like you don't know the peace and calm and kind of rational, measured way because that becomes your normal. So, did your mom ever get any help? Did she ever seek any kind of counseling or any help for these things?
I start chuckling as this is kind of funny in my head. She thinks she's perfect and there's nothing wrong with her.
Okay, so there's that too. So there's no accountability and no kind of inner willingness to look within and kind of change things.
She'll
Uh,
sometimes give like half apology type things like in her own way. And it's just like, you just made the situation worse. Like you can tell you're not actually being genuine and that you're just saying it in like the moment type of thing.
So I want to say this. First of all, I'm really, really, really sorry because this is really hard for a young girl to grow up in. And being the oldest, you didn't have even a sibling buffer. It was all on you for a little while until your siblings were born. And 4 hours of lashing out, that's a lot,
That
at
one was a
any
recent
point.
one.
That was a recent one. So the story's continuing, but you are now 23, which I'm really happy because you have choices and you're not stuck in that home. What I'm really curious about is knowing all this and having the perspective you have now. How did that show up? And I think this is what you want to talk about today. How did all of that conditioning and that kind of environmental chaos show up in your choices as an adult or even as a young person in your relationships?
Because of the lack of stability and everything else going on in my home life, I haven't really felt like I've never really known like what like getting like straight attention and like feeling like loved or cared about from other people really felt like. When I've had like relationships pop up where like they're just like being super sweet, super like helpful, like giving me a lot of attention, like giving me compliments all the time and like trying to like sometimes helping me through different things that are going on or things that are going on at home that I just go and vent about. Like they seem like they're always like they're trying to be like a comfort and be there for me and everything else that you'd actually want. And then slowly down the line, once like I'm hooked, basically, it's when they start showing their true colors. Like I had this one guy that anytime I would tell him no for anything, he'd throw a fit like a toddler.
Mhm.
Like silent treatment, he would just ignore me, threaten to break up with me type of things, and like just all of this like weird, chaotic stuff. I tried to break up with him at one point and he wouldn't let me. He wouldn't let me leave. I was
Mhm.
like, great. I'm now stuck in your house. What am I going to do? So finally I was able to get home. Like I was like, okay, fine, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like just kind of stayed just so I can go home. And when I finally broke up with him a few months later, like I finally like got it over. He then followed me to one of the stores I went to all the time with one of my other friends who was also a guy. I was like, what the heck is going on? I was like, after that, I finally was able to like not have him follow me anywhere. Like I had my friend come with me to my house because I was scared he was going to show up to my house for a little
Mm,
bit. Like,
right.
because he's done that before too when I stopped responding for like 5 minutes. So
What we grow up with, oftentimes, I believe, to heal those relationships, we seek out something similar and we get the opportunity to try again to kind of heal these things. And we often do it subconsciously. We don't even know that, like you said, like you didn't see his true colors until later. And here it is, a person that sounds very much like what you grew up with, the lashing out, the fear, like you probably lived your childhood in a lot of fear and a lot of walking on eggshells and a lot of, I'm not safe, I'm not protected, and even deeper, I'm not even loved, like I'm not shown the care and attention that I deserve and need and really need. So it's amazing to me how this happens over and over and over, and I see it in my own life. Things that I haven't resolved, I'll be like, "Oh my gosh, it's back. Here it is in another person, but it's back." And I see those as opportunities to work on. So your radar for red flags, How is it now after all that? Like, do you feel like you have a better radar for seeing the true colors and the red flags earlier before it gets to that point?
I'd say yes, but at this point, probably not. After my last relationship, which was ended last year, it took a lot out of me. And I finally was able to be like, okay, I now know, like, I've always been the type of person who would like just back down, cower down, I guess, just kind of appease them and just trying to like get rid of the situation because I'm just like, I don't do a lot of like yelling and screaming. That just kind of like is like, it guess would trigger me, I guess is the word. Like it just causes a lot of like PTSD responses and stuff like that from everything else, like growing up, like with all of the screaming and fighting and like watching actual like fist fights get thrown down and things like that. Like it screaming, I shut down. So I'm like, I don't do well. So I just kind of say whatever they need to hear and get it to stop. And it's just like, okay, this is fine. After my last relationship and going through all of that stuff, like a bunch of different stuff with him, I finally like was able to, I started standing up for myself more often. Like
Good.
even if it's at work or like with friends or whoever it is, like even with my mom, like I'm just like, I cannot take this anymore. Like I pick and choose my battles with her because sometimes it's just an endless cycle of, and it's not going to go anywhere. I finally am like, okay, I can actually speak what's on my mind, say how I'm feeling, express what I'm thinking. So like I finally am able to now stand up, and if they don't like it or are not having fun with the fact that I'm speaking for myself and not cowering down to them, as a lot of I guess abusers and toxic people are like, don't like, then I'm like, okay, cool. That's already showing me your colors.
I want to just say it's very interesting to me. And by the way, thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing stories. I know sometimes it's hard to tell the stories of our own upbringing and what we've gone through. But, I think that there's different kinds of dysfunction in families. And I don't know that it's really important, but I am a little bit curious about the dysfunctionality of your mother's relationships, because obviously that impacted you. And I'm wondering, were they just like verbally abusive? Were they physically abusive? Were they just alcoholics? There's a lot of ways that dysfunction like shows up. And I mean, I ask this, one thing is your mother was chased by her boyfriend, and then you had a boyfriend who locked you in their house.
The incident where me and my mom were chased out of the house, like I was like 4 or 5, give or take. My mom actually brought that memory back to the surface several months ago, which was great. That was fun.
I really want to validate the real feelings for you, because you didn't have an opportunity to ever process or really get deep with what that was. And it wasn't great. It wasn't fun. So and it's important that you, for your own healing, and doing that in therapy is the best place. But just for us now I get where you are, and kind of being like, I don't even know how else to conceptualize this other than like, great mom, thanks. That's fun to bring that up. But for us right now, what feelings can you associate with being chased like that as a 4 and 5-year-old, which is a very impressionable
Terrifying.
age? Terrified. I'm here to tell you that you definitely have PTSD, because that is terrifying in and of itself, the act, but then the way that you have even kind of compartmentalized it, and then the way it shows up in other things, it's definitely a past trauma that continues to kind of get triggered. So I don't know, I want to get into if you've ever been to therapy, but yes, terrified. Tell me more about what terrified feels like.
I remember I did fall, and that's why we got caught and then locked into the house waiting for my grandmother to come get me or come get us.
Yeah. Keep breathing. So this is important. We can all breathe with you.
I'm not really sure, because I try to block out any emotions associated to things like that, so it doesn't get to me, I guess.
Right. Right. We're going to work through this right here, right now. This is one of the things that I do in my trauma therapy. We're going to get you past this. So just give me this scenario. You fell and then you guys got caught and you're locked in the house and you're, I'm sure, kind of crouching or waiting for your grandmother and in this
Sure.
terrified place, right?
I'm pretty sure in this incident is when we locked ourselves in my bedroom and like barricaded the door basically, and he's like pounding on it. And we're just waiting for my grandmother to get there at that point to like try to get him away from the door to get us.
Okay, let's stop it right there because that's a key moment to work with. And this is trauma reprogramming, right? So this is super important. If you had, and the sky's the limit, you could do anything to rewrite this story, what in that moment could you envision today as your higher, wiser self at 23? What would you have wanted to have happened? Let's go through the same thing. You're in the bedroom, you're waiting there, he's pounding on the door. Let's rewrite this in your psyche. Tell us what you would have rather had happen.
Rather my had happened, my mom called the cops.
Let's keep going with that. So your mom has the peace of mind, the rational stance to call the cops. And what does she say?
Everything that was going on. I don't know what led up to us being chased out of the house. I don't remember at all. I just remember the incident. So I have no idea like what happened before all of that.
That's okay. She calls the cops and then what happens? What would you want to have happen? They come right away. They arrest him. They what?
Yeah, because after that, they were together for 7+ years.
Whoa. Okay, so let's really finish out this narrative. So she calls the cops and then what? What would you have wanted to have happened?
I really don't know. Like, I'm a very nice person, so I don't know.
Okay, but you don't have to be nice in this. He's threatening you guys and he's scaring you. So you don't have to be nice because this is survival and you're not nice to a saber-toothed tiger, right? You can't be. You'll get eaten. So let's throw out nice for a second and just think in your rational mind. Let's say this is reparenting. Let's say this is your little child. What would you want to have happen? Your little child is 4 or 5 years old, scared to death, hearing the banging. Mom, you decide or mom decides, I'm going to call the cops. And then what happens?
I get arrested.
Yeah, perfect. That's appropriate. That's an appropriate action. So he gets arrested. And does mom go back with him for 7 years or even a year or even 2 days?
No.
No. Okay. So what does mom end up doing with you? This is a key part.
To be like coddled, I get coddled, I guess.
Absolutely. 100%. So it's really, really important that you know that you didn't get what you needed. What you needed was to be coddled, reassured, hugged, brought back to, it's okay, I'm going to keep you safe. And you didn't get that. So you're in unsafe relationships repeatedly. So it would be helpful possibly, and I hope so, to close your eyes for a minute and imagine, and I'm going to do it with you and Steph can do it with you. Imagine holding your little 5-year-old self and really helping her feel safe, secure, nurtured, and held, and knowing that he's away, it's okay, he's not in the picture anymore, he's detained, you are safe and you are loved. That's all you really wanted, was to be safe and loved. So let's imagine that and breathe with that for a second. What does it feel like just imagining yourself being held and nurtured and loved by an adult female? Can you imagine that?
Not really.
I thought not. Okay. So there's the work, Lilith. That's what the work is for you to find a way to do that for your own little self, your own self that is that 4 or 5-year-old. That's the point of trauma. That's the point of PTSD, because that event is so significant. And I realized there were many and maybe even more before that, but that's an important one. So in trauma work, you work through each of those moments and because they're so significant and they're embedded, and you can, if you choose, to rewrite that outcome. The mind is so powerful. but the mind doesn't know time, and we can do it today, even though it happened, 19 years ago or whatever it was. We can do it today and reparent and get you up to speed with where you are so that you can have really healthy, strong, clear, boundaried relationships and not have this. And it all starts there with knowing that you can love and nurture yourself and be loved and nurtured. You didn't ever get to experience that. And my heart is so sorry for you. I didn't get a lot of that either. So I can relate. What it takes is a willingness to do that for ourselves, and to not let that piece be gone. And it's a work in progress, but you got a mini part of it. I thank you for being willing to do this, because it was a little in the moment exercise where I was like, this can show you how important that event is in your life, because it has shaped everything moving forward, everything. And you had many of those moments, like the remote control one is another one of 4 hours of being yelled at for like something I didn't do. That's another huge trauma. And so I imagine whenever you're yelled at, that's triggered. Whenever you're feeling trapped and scared, that memory is triggered again without even knowing it. So in a way, I'm grateful that your mom did bring it up. I am thankful, because then you can say, hey, this is really key that I change this. So how are you? How does this feel?
Not doing too great.
Not doing too great. Okay, let's continue this story. This will help. This will help you. Yeah, Steph.
I think for the listening audience, because just like you just said to Lilith, she has to, if she chooses to, she can go through all of those moments of trauma of her younger self, and she can do that same exercise. And I don't know, maybe you can journal about it. Maybe you just think it through and visualize that, even if you're the protector of the little person. But I think the things, like, I just want the listener to go like, what are those things in my life? And if there's things I think that you kind of gloss over, I was saying, I feel like the listeners, you and I, that's traumatizing for an adult to be chasing you. I have nightmares like that. I don't want anyone chasing me. I can't imagine a 5-year-old being chased. So there are those moments, if you're glossing over them, they probably have it's just probably something that you are, I don't know, it's so buried so deep that you're not really addressing. And so maybe that should be the first signal that, hey, this is something I should look at. Just as myself, as the casual listener, when I heard the way that she talked about someone trapping her in their apartment, that's scary to me. I can't imagine being with somebody and then continuing to be with them. I can't help but think that Lilith's mother showed her that when somebody does something like that, that's threatening, you don't have to leave. You can stay with them. And I think, maybe this will heal those choices in the future, that if somebody does something, you realize that little girl needed protection, and today you need protection from, by your choices, you can help yourself.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think that we all have these moments, Lilith, and that's what I want everybody to know too. I was chased too, so I can totally relate. I could feel like I remember that terror. I was older, but I remember that terror. So I definitely understand and can't imagine as being that young too, of that terror. And here's where I want to continue. What's so great about this work is that that you can't even imagine your mother getting there. And God bless her. She probably had traumas in her own life, which you said, Steph. She definitely had. This is possibly generational stuff. But so your mom can't get there to be nurturing in your own mind. Who in your life is a woman that is, even if she's the same age, that is nurturing and supportive and loving to you and validating? Because you mentioned attention too. Who in your life gives you attention, care, support, and love? Is there anybody?
My one grandmother, well, both my grandmothers, but my one more so than the other. So my one, she kind of has her own little ways of how she does it, but then sometimes we'll turn around and like hold it against you type of thing. So it's like yes and no with her. But my one grandmother on my mom's side. She's always been like my number one fan. And my great grandmother always was too, but she passed away in 2017.
Okay. So, and I'm sorry she passed away, but it's so interesting to me because a lot of people, when I ask that, do say a grandmother. So grandmothers serve such a role because I think they learn by the time they're not parents anymore. They may have been shitty parents, but by the time they get to grandparents, they're like, oh, okay, I got this right. I can do this with my grand.
My grandmother, who's very nurturing and like caring, actually grew up in foster care and had
Okay.
a lot happen to her.
Okay, so this makes so much sense. So this is a lot of generational patterns of attachment issues and issues with parenting and issues with families. So this is a lot of stuff. And what's great is that here now today, the patterning can stop with you. And what I'd love for you to do, if you can, again, close your eyes, because it couldn't happen with your mom. And we always know this. This is why I like this methodology, because I'm not telling you how it is. You know exactly how it is. You know it's not mom. It's got to be somebody else, and it's grandma. So that particular grandma, can you imagine her in your mind's eye and feel into that of her holding you, comforting you, nurturing you, giving you the validation, support, and safety that you needed?
I don't think I can.
Neither great grandmom or grandmom. No.
No.
Okay. So after the show, we'll keep working on it because I want you to have that. This is why the whole topic of why do I keep having struggles in relationships? Because you have such a deficit and such a hole and a void with that in your life. This is my best guess. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but this is my best guess, is that there was such a void in that of course you can't, you're working on an empty tank, like a void that it's not filled yet, and you can't even imagine it being filled. If you can't even imagine it being filled, it's not possibly going to be filled. So we're going to have to work on your imagination. Let me ask you this. If you close your eyes, can you imagine sitting in a movie theater and the taste of popcorn?
Kind of.
Kind of. Okay. So a lot of your senses are cut off. I'm going to ask you something that I'm just curious, because it will help you and it'll help listeners, but most importantly, help you. Do you know if you were ever sexually abused?
Not by anybody in the family, but I
Okay.
have been.
You have been. Okay. I thought so. So a lot of times with sexual abuse, the senses get completely cut off, or they'll come back just in certain things, but the ability to imagine in ways like that, it's just not there, because I'm cutting off everything, so I don't feel what's really happening in the moment. What age was that when that happened? Do you remember?
It's happened a lot. So there's
It happened a
different
lot.
ages.
Okay, so this makes so much sense, Lilith. Thank you so much for sharing that. This is what happens when, gosh darn it, people abuse kids. This is the freaking problem with this, is that there's the incident, and then there is the long aftermath. That is a very difficult process. Steph knows this. I know this from working in this field and having siblings that had been abused. So my hope and my prayer for you is, we need to help you, if you don't already have it, with a really good sexual assault counselor, a trauma therapist, somebody that can help you with these things. Do you have anybody? Have you seen anybody?
I've gone to therapy a lot, but
Okay.
I tend to not really talk much about like the past stuff because I just block it out a lot.
Yeah.
And I wait till there's 5 minutes left in the session and be like, oh yeah, this is going on.
Okay. And that makes sense too, because it's so traumatic that you don't want to go there. I want you to keep telling yourself over and over and over that the past is past. You said a mantra that I think has stuck with you. It's interesting. I just used the word stuck. You said, I got the short end of the stick, and you did. You absolutely did, Lilith. But I want to say today, moving forward, no more short end of the stick. Let freedom ring. Like, this is your path and your time to have your freedom. And I can hook you up. We'll talk after this, and I can set you up with a way to find a therapist that you won't have to wait till the last 5 minutes of the session, and you can work towards this. What do you want to say, Steph?
Thank you for sharing that story, Lilith, so much. As somebody who's been sexually assaulted, I understand how hard those, even just saying those words, can be. And I also want to say that a couple of things, and I don't know how much you know about survivors of sexual assault, but oftentimes people are sexually assaulted more than once. That's not uncommon. So I don't want you to feel like this keeps happening to me. Like Dr. Shez said, maybe, it's the words have power. They have so much power over how we view ourselves, but it really is just repeated patterns from our life, and I understand that as much as anybody. So I just want to say, don't get down on yourself about that. These are like things we have to learn and go through. The other thing I wanted to say is that I remember Oprah Winfrey said, words have power, and I never really understood it. And as life has gone on, and that was probably 30 years ago that I heard her say that, as life has gone on, I really realized the power of the words, the things that we say. So I try to watch the things that I say, the things that my children say. I'm always on them if they say something like, whatever, I'm just going to kill myself. And I'm like, don't say that. Don't put that energy into the universe. And in that same way, I got the short end of the stick tells you that you're always going to get the short end of the stick. So that was before, but that's not today.
I will say there's a lot that has happened that has been good lately.
Good. See, no longer getting the short end of the stick.
I liked where you said that you're starting now to stand up to your mom, stand up at work, to start feeling into your voice and your boundaries and your own wants and needs and be able to voice those. My wish and my hope for you is that the more that you can do that, the better. And the more that you can, even at the grocery store, or anywhere that you just feel like you can stand up for yourself and speak your piece in a kind, right way. But if it's like, anything, I can't even think of what necessarily, but let's say at work, any way that you can start practicing standing up for yourself and be able to set boundaries and say no and be okay with that is going to be really helpful for you. That's one side of the coin. The other side, or let's say the stick, that's one side of the stick. The other side of the stick, to make it not short-ended anymore, is to figure out ways to really nurture yourself. Because at this stage, because you missed so much of that as a child, it's hard for other people, and I wouldn't suggest other people be responsible for doing that, but finding ways to nurture yourself and grow that stick so that it can be whole and feel good and feel nurtured and feel complete and feel supported and feel validated. We can start right here, right now. Steph said it several times, but I'll say again, I want to nurture and support you right here, right now, with having the strength to share your truth and be so real and raw and honest. And, I talk to a lot of people in my therapy. And so, like, a lot of people have these kind of stories, and it may take a long time to get out of, what was the original thing, and where did this start, and how deep was it? And you got there pretty quick, which is awesome, because then you can really work with that, which is why I chose to say, hey, let's do something right now with this, because it's so ingrained and so deeply etched in you. It's going to take a little bit of time, but you can get there. You can totally get there by starting with many ways that you nurture yourself. And when you're a parent, because I know you're a parent of a 2-year-old, when you're a parent, a lot of times we put aside self-nurturing because we're on 24/7 with a little one. And so I hope and I encourage and I pray that you have the opportunity to weave in your own self-nurturing and not put it off even longer.
Just remember, just keep focusing on those things. And I have to say, I was molested when I was 8 years old. And I remember one of a therapist that I went to asking me to look to remember the 8-year-old girl. Could I close my eyes and could I see that 8-year-old me? That was so emotional for me. It was so hard for me to like actually pull up a vision of myself at 8 years old and just sit with the fact of how little that little girl was, probably seeing your son at 2 years old. You realize, like sometimes before we have children, we don't realize how small 8 years old is or how small 4 and 5 years old is. But having your son can be very confronting and also very like eye-opening and forgiving for ourselves. That's what I found. I found that like, sometimes we have these stories in our head like, well, maybe if I didn't, or I fell for what this person said, or I did this, and we blame ourselves, even though it's very clearly to anyone else, it's very clear to anyone else that it's not us, it's them. But it doesn't matter. As somebody who's gone through, multiple sexual assaults or even, abusive relationships, it's really easy to come down on ourselves. But when we're able to really look at it in somebody else, we often are a lot more forgiving of ourselves. I don't know if you've found that when as you have your son, as you see like even just your mom, if she was impatient with you or she created chaos around you, you can see your little boy when that chaos is around him, how it upsets his brain and the way he processes things,
Yeah.
right?
He runs and hides and comes to me when that's going on.
Is
I
it,
currently live with her, so
so do you get that? Like, do you see that? Like, did having your son give you some forgiveness for yourself?
yeah, and it's also shown me what like love and caring and nurturing is supposed to feel like.
Yes.
So
Yeah. I hear that. I think that's true. And I think as he gets older and you start to remember and recall the moments of your life, when you see him at that age, it really helps you to be able to separate yourself from that 4-year-old, from that 8-year-old, from that 12-year-old. I don't know how old you were when you were sexually assaulted, but even that, say like, I see my son at 14 years of age. I see how easily manipulated he could be by somebody who's older than him, or if he were to drink and he knows nothing about alcohol, you know what I mean? It's really
mhm.
easy for us to see it in the people that we love and how vulnerable they might be, or how innocent they are, or how easily manipulated they are. It really, I feel like, does offer us a window into forgiveness of ourselves.
I was 18 and up with all of my incidents.
When you were sexually assaulted.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And
sorry.
did they all happen around the same time? Or it was just from the time you were 18 on?
One was with the one who actually locked me in his house, and then I think I was 19 with the next two.
Different people.
Yeah,
And did you stay with the one who locked you in the house after the sexual assault happened?
for a little bit.
Did you not know how to, did you, like, if you don't mind my asking, did you know how to categorize what happened between the two? Was it very clearly sexual assault, or do you feel like there was something that made it unclear to you to be able to actually define it as sexual assault?
So it took me a while to realize that it was. So like it wasn't like the whole like pin you down type of thing. It was like I said no, he threw a fit and like manipulated and coerced into then doing it even though I still didn't want to when it happened. Type of thing.
And it's you're not the first person who that's hard to, I mean, in my, as a sexual assault counselor, but also as somebody who deals with a lot of college students, this is not uncommon, and it's not uncommon that you would have questions about it. This is somebody you previously had sexual, relations with, but you know, anger, forcing, coercing, all of those kinds of things, that is very clearly sexual assault. And it makes me sad that you didn't have the knowledge that that's what that was. I don't know whether you would have left. Maybe you would have, maybe you wouldn't have. But how long did it take you to realize that that was sexual assault?
Seeing a video on TikTok talking about it. It's like, oh, great.
Yeah. I'm so sorry, because I think sometimes people think because I did it before, because I said I would have sex with them tonight and now I'm not in the mood, that somehow gives somebody the right to expect that you will perform sexually for them. You have complete and utter agency over everything. It doesn't matter whether 10 minutes ago you were in the kitchen and you were talking about it, and then you went into the bedroom and you were like, you know what? I just feel like I'm really not into this. You know, you can walk away at any time. You can say no at any time, and you have that right. Do you understand that part now?
Yeah.
Is that what happened in the subsequent times as well? Was it that same thing repeating over?
With a couple of them, yeah. But with one, no.
Okay. You know, the important thing with somebody who's been sexually assaulted is your power was taken away from you, your agency over yourself. You know, people crossed your boundaries, and especially in this case, somebody coercing you, doing all of that stuff is really like encroaching or crossing, not even encroaching, crossing your boundaries. I feel like all of these things, like, you know, the way your mother berated you for 4 hours over something so small, the way somebody crossed your boundaries and literally took advantage of your physical well-being in several instances besides sexual assault, locking you in a room. I feel like boundaries are really important. I think they're always the things that are kind of missing when we come from dysfunction. Sometimes, until we have the knowledge, we don't know that we have the right to put a boundary on certain things, right? You have a right to not be berated for 4 hours about something. You have a right to say, I don't want to have sex right now. I don't want to do this. And you're not allowed to make me feel that way. You're not allowed to make me feel as though I'm not living up to my part of the deal. So I think until maybe you walked through these experiences, you didn't know that you needed a boundary there. But now maybe you can go back and look and create boundaries. And just like Dr. Shez is saying, make steps to self-care. I would say make steps to live up to and hold your boundaries.
How does that feel for you hearing that stuff?
Good.
Good. Does it feel a little more empowering to hear somebody say, you know, you have a right to stand up and say what your boundaries are and your needs are and your, you know, what you're willing to take and not take,
Yeah.
and what you're willing to do and not do? Good. It's baby steps often because the conditioning has been for a long time. So it's going to be baby steps. And if you do it with the easier stuff first, which is why I said the grocery store, like do it I'm suggesting maybe do it in the easier places first and feel into it, and then see if over time, you know, it feels better to stand up for other things, you know, that it just keeps kind of continuing, that you feel like you find your voice and you find your strength and your power. And I offer this to you. We're here. This 7 on Sundays podcast is not just a podcast. Our long range plan is to have live meetings within every community, but we're going to start, you know, on Zoom. So we invite you to come and feel support from other women and men who have had similar, very similar experiences, and hear from others about their journeys and where they are in this process and how they kind of came into a new place, if they're there yet, of feeling into their agency over themselves and their decisions and choices. And then it's all an experiment to see like, hey, this is how this then trickles into my relationship with my son, or my relationship with my boyfriend, or my relationship with friends and your mother, you know, and with your mother, I want you to keep remembering and envisioning that flag, that you have the freedom of choice in how you are with that relationship with her now. You can choose what kind of relationship you have with her now. When you were little and you lived with her, choice was a little less of an issue, you know, of an option. But now you have a choice And if it doesn't feel right and it doesn't feel it's serving your highest good at this time, you don't have to hang around for the 4 hours of ranting, like no more. That is also a process. It's not just because I say that or Steph suggests something that you can do it, but we want to support you and we want to continue to be a resource. So I invite you to that. I also will definitely help you with how to find, if it's not the counselor that you're working with, but how to find somebody that in your area that might be able to help you with these trauma things, because you can move past the points of being so stuck and have a new mantra. I mean, maybe that's something before we leave. I know we're near the end of our time, but I'd love to know what you feel. And just, this is off the cuff, there's no wrong answers. But instead of, I have the short end of the stick, I don't want to carry that into the present and future. What would you say is your mantra for what you want out of your life?
Not sure, but I can say just never give up.
Awesome. You're amazing. I love that. Never give up. And that is a huge first big, it's not a baby step. That is a big step of, you've been through a lot, and I would imagine that giving up is often an option or could be an option. And I love that keep rolling forward, never give up. And that's a great mantra for yourself.
I just want to say one other thing, and this is for you, Lilith, and this is for anybody who listens. As a person who did experience sexual assault, I can tell you that these things don't heal overnight. I always tell my kids, like, this is something I carry with me for the rest of my life. Even in my life at this moment, there will be times where I'll realize that I have a certain reaction or a numbness to certain things because of because of what happened to me. And that I feel very, like one way you'll see it is I get really, really defensive of people. When I hear slut shaming, it literally makes alarm bells go off in my head. I get really angry. And sometimes it's like, more angry than maybe the average person will be like, oh, hey, that's like uncool. But like, there's still things where I realize, oh, that comes from that feeling of I was dirty, I was wrong, I did something I shouldn't have, and feeling judged by other people. So it's something that you work on for your whole life. It just gets less painful and triggering, I will say. Dr. Shez, you talked about finding that grandmother or someone in her visualization of the previous trauma. And I was saying to Lilith that a therapist had done that with me when I was going through therapy about being molested as an 8-year-old. And I said to Lilith, this was one of the most, it made me cry so much to be able to look at my 8-year-old self and to think about that little person. And I think I was the person who gave that little person validation that they were okay, that they were wrong. It wasn't that, I guess no one ever said like, who would that person be? But for the person, like, because there are some people who don't feel like they do have a female role model. Can you be your own hero in the past visualization?
Yes, 100%. Yes. And it may be you at this age, at a future age. And that's really a beautiful thing that you did that, Steph, because then you carry her with you forever, in your mind. And that's what you're doing, is you're replacing. When trauma happens, our first language is pictures, right? We were a baby without words, and all we had were visuals. And so when trauma happens, it gets stored as a visual. And if we can replace that, again, the mind does not know time. If we can replace that, like I can taste popcorn in this moment, even just thinking about it right this second. I can taste movie theater popcorn, which is different than the boring popcorn I make, but I can taste it right now. I can almost salivate because my mind can go there that fast. We can do that. So if you replace the picture and the image and feeling and attach it with that feeling of nurturance, the more you can try to call that in, Lilith, and try to get there in your own mini meditations at night or in the quiet of the morning, try to call that in, the more that you're replacing this trauma imagery that gets stuck in us. And the more we open up those visions, those images of the trauma, the more open we can be about replacing it. I love that it was in the bedroom. You remember all those things. So if you can go back to that and do the same thing, but replace it and follow it through in the new way. Dream experts talk about finishing the nightmare. When you have a nightmare and you wake up with a nightmare, you finish it in real time. You can be like, I'm not going to stay stuck in the nightmare. Let me finish it. And that's another therapeutic tool. So this is the tool of knowing your trauma moment and really working through it in present time to be able to finish it and not let it stay stuck there. And that way you're reprogramming your psyche, and the mood and the feelings all catch up then. Otherwise, we stay stuck with those moods and those feelings constantly, and they get triggered and poked like a splinter over and over and over until we remove the splinter and say, okay, it's gone now. Here's what's in its place. If that imagery helps, may not work for everyone, but if that helps you, that would be a starting place for sure. What do you think, Lilith?
I don't do
How are
well
you?
with silence, so I don't know.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
We talked about a lot of trauma things today. And you know what I think comes out is the whole goal of today was to talk about how our childhood experiences influence what happens today. I don't know that we got all the way to the point where we wanted, but I think where we stayed was really important, because you are making a choice for your child to rewrite the story. It's gonna stop with you because you're going and doing the work. And I think that's what's important. And I think none of us knew what to expect today, least of all probably you. And I think that we got to a really good place, and I hope you feel good about it.
Let me ask you this, Lilith, just in closing. Why did you want to share anything with us today? What's your why?
I've always been the type of person to be there and try to help other people through their problems. I've always ignored my own problems because I just don't want to deal with them or remember them and stuff. So I always try to help other people for what they're going through, and like try to like be like, hey, like here's a little tidbit of my story. Like, you're not alone. Like, I'm here. I want to help. Rant to me, talk to me. I can give you advice if needed. Like, I've always been that person. So like, I wanted to come on here and share and show like other people, like it might not be 100% to a T the same, but like it's something similar maybe. And like, you're not alone. You can find people who are there to help. And like, I've always just wanted to help and try to like show people like it's not just you. And but like, it sucks to say that, but like it's not just you. And like other people are here to help. And like it like and try to help them give advice to like on how to go forward from there, or how to handle a current situation they're in or dealing with. Like, actually gave one of my new coworkers advice on how to deal with his current situation. And he actually leaving work, he actually was like, I feel a lot better now. I'm like, you're welcome. Like, I just wanted to like help him out with that. Like, I was like, you can always come talk to me if you ever need anything, type of thing, like.
And did it help you? Do you feel like helping others helped you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the same time, I've realized I'm a big empath, so I kind of pull their stuff onto me. So like, it helps me in the moment, but in the long run, it kind of drains me.
Yeah. So that's another place to start kind of putting boundaries, and to be okay with, maybe putting a little bit of that barrier up, that it's okay for you to work on you versus helping everybody else. But may I give you a reflection back?
Sure.
Okay, good. Every word that you said, Lilith, I want to give back to you, because you said exactly what I feel you might need to hear. So here it is. I want you to know, I know that you've gone through a lot. I want you to know that you are not alone. I want you to know that you can find people to help you. I want you to know that you can rant and you can talk to us. I want you to know you can come to 7 on Sundays and rant and talk, and know you are not alone and that there are others here to help you. So your why, I want to give back to you. That is for you too. We are here for you. And maybe not a lot of people in your life have said that or been that, but we want to be that for you. Can you accept that?
Yeah.
Yay. Lilith, yay. Okay. And the mantra is never give up. Keep going. You got this. Never give up.
Yeah.
Lilith, thank you so much for giving so much of yourself and of your story and of your vulnerability to us. We really appreciate it. And Dr. Shez and I like the expression that you're not broken, you're golden. And it comes from the idea of kintsugi, the Japanese art when a pot or any piece of ceramic breaks, that they put it back together with gold glue. And I think, just like in my own life, I really resonated with the saying, the wound is where the light enters you. And I really think that this wound that you have is deep, but it's also what gives you the empathy to help the people at work and to help other people. And it really is the place where maybe you shine. You have to put boundaries around when you do it and how often you do it. But it also is a place where you'll have a lot of compassion for other people and you'll be able to help them heal once you heal yourself.
Thank you. Aho to that. Thank you for joining us for this episode of 7 on Sundays.
The 7 on Sundays podcast represents the opinions of Dr. Shez Levy and Stephanie Boy based on our experience. It also shares the stories, behaviors, and opinions of our guests that we do not necessarily condone or view as healthy. 7 on Sundays is an open forum to discuss what is happening with our listening audience. Some names and details of our guest stories have been changed to protect their anonymity. This podcast is not a substitute for mental health treatment. If you are in crisis and in need of mental health support, please call 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It is free and confidential.
Join the conversation and connect with us through our website, 7onsundays.com. That's the number 7onsundays.com. We encourage everyone to do their own research. Thank you and be well.